This week, more revelations related to the irregular 150 million rand Digital Vibes contract with the National Health Department have emerged. And they further implicate Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who is currently on special leave, and his son Dedani to more allegations of corruption. In submissions to the Special Tribunal, the Special Investigating Unit states that Mkhize repeatedly pressurised the Health Department's Director General, Malebona Matsoso, to approve the irregular contract. It also goes further to say that the minister's conduct was improper at best and unlawful at worst, as it constituted interference by an executive authority in the affairs of an administrative authority. And the president has yet to act on the final SIU report, which is reported to have been handed to him a month ago. Now, the latest developments have further added to calls that the president needs to reconfigure his cabinet. Political analyst Dr. Ralph Mathekga joins us now for his perspective on all of these matters. Dr. Mathekga, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to viewers at home.
So the SIU report into the Digital Vibes saga was reportedly made available to the president a month ago. What are your thoughts on the president's seeming reluctance to act on that report?
I mean, Sakina, to start with, if you look at the details that are coming out that have been reported in the media, you ask yourself, is this corruption or was this just taking? I mean, there is no sophistication here, Sakina, from what's being reported. The way in which money was laundered from the accounts to cash and carry to some businesses, nail businesses and so forth. You look at it, it says that those that are actually facing serious, sophisticated corruption will be offended to be put next to the people that are implicated in this digital vibe scandal. It is pedestrian level corruption. It's not sophisticated at all. And I think, Sakina, that is the reason why people are actually saying that, Mr. President, at least take a position here, show a stance, show that you empathize on the side of South Africans and make a decision. Have a permanent Minister of Health appointed, agree, remove Dr. Zweli Mkhize. You don't have to wait for a honorable exit if there is such under the circumstances. But Sakina, President Ramaphosa, again, he never takes this decision head on. Usually he waits for them to become inevitable. Most often when such kind of decisions are expected, he will take time to a point where by the time he makes decision, even if it might be a good decision, you find that it looks as if there has been a lot of political calculation. The decision usually, it lacks that principle by the time it's being made. And I think if you make this decision now, you don't allow further speculation on the career of a health minister, at least that will demonstrate empathy. That will demonstrate that the president and government, they are not tone deaf regarding what is happening on the ground, Sakina.
So when you talk about political calculation, let's confine ourselves to Dr. Zweli Mkhize. What would be the calculation around his dismissal?
I mean, this is a very senior minister within the ANC, the minister who actually positioned himself as a frontman in President Ramaphosa's response to the biggest pandemic to have ever hit us, the global pandemic. He is the face of government. And Dr. Zweli Mkhize has also been seen as an ally of president, or at least one can say not a detractor of the president, that's President Cyril Ramaphosa. To lose someone like that, and we are losing someone like that, a politician who has got a basis in KwaZulu-Natal, comes from KwaZulu-Natal, it should be a concern for President Ramaphosa as to what are the implications given the state of the party, the tension that exists within the party, the tension in KZN, the looting that we have seen. You put that into context, you ask yourself, would it be the right moment for the president to lose someone who was almost an ally, someone coming from the province of KZN? It's not the right moment, but unfortunately, events have conspired to a point where the president cannot save Dr. Zweli Mkhize at all. If he tries to save Dr. Zweli Mkhize, it will look like it will undermine the president's anti-corruption drive. So unfortunately, this is one of those circumstances, Sagina, where anti-corruption takes also those that you might have considered or those that have appeared to be your allies. And it is the consequences here of politics, and I think it seems to be what has been weighing heavily on this. We've seen President Ramaphosa being very circumspect on these allegations of transgression, maybe excessively too circumspect given the gravity of this. It all comes down to politics, Sakina.
But surely the concern for South Africans who are not members of or have allegiance to the African National Congress in any way, shape or form would be asking about the separation between party and state.
Indeed, I mean, if you look at this, as we're talking about cabinet reshuffle, the events that precipitated this call are what came out of observation outside the ANC. It is not because the ANC-led government sat down and considered that we're doing badly in one area or the other area, therefore we are considering a reshuffle. That's not the case here. Events conspired. We have seen the lapses that we talk about in the security cluster resulting in the looting. We have seen the health minister having to step aside at the moment that the country is facing the most serious global pandemic. That is why outside the ANC, that is where this call for cabinet reshuffle are coming out. And Sakina, even most importantly, is that I don't think the ANC still has that leeway, that runway where they can just cut from one department, take a minister from one department, just recycle. I think this external pressure that comes from outside the ANC also demands that you have credible people there. It's not going to be an ordinary reshuffle. If the president is going to try to have this as an ordinary reshuffle with at least the minimal political implications for internal battles within the ANC, that is not going to fly. The consideration should be integrity. People, I think, want to see government at least demonstrating that they can at least have people right there or at the top position. You and I know that ministers are not appointed on the basis of the technical competence. But I think in a moment such as this, you don't want someone who's going to have an outright credibility crisis from day one. That is what I think the expectation from outside the party.
So if we look at further expectations outside of the party, there's been huge criticism about how government and the security cluster in particular handled the recent spate of looting and unrest in the country. Then you also have the economic cluster, also singled out for great criticism about how the economy has been handled. You then have the Minister of Public Enterprises, given what has happened with the state-owned entities under his watch. So if you look at all of that, what sort of maneuverability does the president have in order for him to come out smelling of roses, both as state president and as president of the ANC?
I mean, Sakina, I'm glad you framed this question in this way. I mean, I don't have much expectations regarding the economic cluster and your public enterprises. And I'll tell you why. It has always been my view that the ANC as a political party has got no clear agenda what to do with the economy. I think that the ANC has just been improvising. And I also want to believe, as I observe this, Sakina, that even if you did not have the crisis of corruption in the public service, even if you did not have the crisis of legitimacy that we are having, I still think that this government will still struggle to craft a clear agenda with the economy and follow through on that. So I've always had lesser expectations when it comes to those departments, the economic cluster. Because if you look at what the party decided at the Nazareth conference and what we are having now in terms of how we ought to respond to this crisis, the pandemic, and also just the question of fiscal consolidation, making sure that we manage our budget very well. Clearly, there is no discernible agenda here. So I'll be more forgiving when it comes to the economic cluster, is because I'm being realistic in terms of my expectation. I think that the politics is just not well grounded to come up or to produce a clear, coherent policy with the economy. However, Sakina, when it comes to the security cluster, the thing with the security cluster is that failure is not abstract. It's just right there in your face. If the security cluster fails, the country burns down. We have seen that. That is where I think a lot of anger is channeled at, that they at least do something about this, because it has to do with the security of the state. If there is such kind of a measure lapse to a point where business feel they are not being protected, ordinary communities, they feel they are not so safe, that is an apparent issue that you cannot deal with gradually. Hence, expectations are that the president will need to come out very clear on the security cluster. So when it comes to the security cluster, I'm expecting to see at least a clear message. Although, Sakina, this is the cluster that you have very senior ministers that are not going to be easy to just remove. They hold their own within the party. They are not going to accept that it is their individual responsibility regarding what has happened in the security labs. So that is where the politics is actually required. You can say the president is between a rock and a hard place. He has to undertake a cabinet reshuffle that is perfectly forced upon him by the circumstances that have reigned in the country in the last few months.
So he has those circumstances to consider on the one hand. On the other hand, he obviously has his eye on the ANC's elective conference in 2022. And as you say, we're talking about senior members of the African National Congress who can hold their own, who have, constituencies of their own that he has to balance now and make like a trapeze artist. But surely the president has to do something. Because what is the message if he does not use his presidential prerogative to do something in the light of the aftermath of abject failure on so many levels, as we've seen in the past few weeks?
And Sakina, the president has set himself up also in his response to what has happened with the social unrest. I mean, he spoke of an insurrection. I mean, you cannot just say something is an insurrection, people correct you, you then say, oh, it was just a mistake. No, that indicates that you ought to do something very deep about the security cluster. So he has to do something. He has to be seen doing something. He also has to be seen, at least in this time, not worrying too much about politics, he need to worry about the concerns that South Africans have outside the ANC. It is going to be a difficult balance, and I think that perhaps at the at the security cluster, Sakina, I've not seen any administration where you remove everyone in security cluster. I mean, you are talking about state security, defense, and the police. If you remove all of them, Sakina, at the same time, it might bring such instability within the ANC itself that when you take the party to an elective conference, the party is quite incoherent to produce results in the form of electing a leader. So this is where I think the president should be worried about. Maybe he might want to go piecemeal at security cluster. Keep some minister, deal with some. The question will be, who will be easy to deal with? Who is disposable and who is not? And
so let me put that to you. Let me put you on the spot. Who would be most disposable in that security cluster right now?
The one who comes out as bringing list of the constituency that can defend themselves, Sakina. I mean, I've spoke about KZN. Again, Sakina, do you want to create political casualties in KZN as well? Minister Begikele is a well-established KZN politician at national level, but understand the KZN politics very well. And one can say that he might have also served as a countervailing force to the political backlash that President Ramaphosa has had to face in KZN after his success in Nasrec. So you need that balance. Who will be Minister Ayanda Dlodlo? She has not pronounced her allegiance to anyone openly. She has not stoked any constituency. What will be the cost of removing her? Minister Mapisa Ngagula, she has also demonstrated that is someone who has constituency. The Women's League is coming to speak on her behalf. Of all these three ministers, Sakina, it looks as if the one that might be easily be pushed quickly, it might be the state security minister, not necessarily because you can apportion the bigger part of the blame to her position, but simply because politically it might be doable. With those other two ministers, politically, you have a challenge. But again, the mere fact that it can be doable in one way makes it very difficult as well, because you also need to justify. You cannot just do it because it is politically doable. Hence, it is between a rock and a hard place, Sakina, and this is happening within the security cluster. The cluster where the ANC's infightings are the most concentrated in any cluster of government, Sakina.
It's going to be very interesting. interesting because, as you say, does the fact that Minister Ayanda Dlodlo, who doesn't seem to be firmly established in either one of the factions, and for the reasons you mentioned, does that mean that she will be the casualty? We'll wait and see. But remember also, Ralph, President Cyril Ramaphosa is on record as saying that he'd rather be seen as a weak president than as a president who splits the ANC. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does.
That's another calculation. Sakina, there, because the difficulty is that whatever the president achieves in the state institutions, when it comes to repositioning state institutions, there is a backlash within the ANC. So that backlash has to be balanced. But at the same time, unity within the ANC cannot and should not be at the expense of the country as well. It's a delicate balance, Sakina.
Dr. Mathekga, Deputy President David Mabuza. Now, he's been quiet, and some have started drawing all sorts of parallels between what is happening now and what was happening during the Zuma presidency with the now president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who was the deputy at the time. Where is the deputy president? Yesterday we were saying he's back, but where is he? And what is the effect and the impact of his absence as, in one role, the leader of government business? His absence. What do we make of all of this?
Sagina, we are speculating on the health because quite often the deputy president has been absent predominantly because of the health situation that he has had to go and deal with the health. And even the idea that his health can only be dealt with in Russia, another secrecy as well in relation to this. And he has been very much absent in the crisis that we have seen. He's someone who just so happened to be absent in that crisis. I mean, of course, one cannot accuse him of just knowing the perfect moment to be absent within the country or the perfect moment to avoid being in the country. But Sagina, the joke has always gone around that if there is anyone who has taken social distancing to greater level in this country since the COVID-19, it has been the deputy president. We have not seen him, and it has happened to a point where one even wonders if he's going to be available to be in the top 6 in the next elective conference of the ANC. What is his master plan? If he is so drawn towards his health issue, shouldn't he be given an opportunity to focus much on that instead of trying to fulfill the demanding task of government, which involves, as you're correctly saying, leading government business? Remember, he's also responsible for dealing with the ESCOM crisis, the load shedding. He was also involved in the issue regarding procurement of the vaccine, but he's so absent. So perhaps what we are seeing, Sakina, is an indication that we might not have our deputy president come the next elective conference of the ANC. He might not stand for a position. It appears to me that his health seems to incapacitating him to be able to fulfill that job. And again, Sakina, we are navigating in the blind. There is such high secrecy around the deputy president's health to a point where it's quite worrying.
And quite apart from the health and the speculation that's been made around that, the Deputy President has a pending 1 billion rand court case along with some others, which was postponed last week. Deputy President Mabuza hasn't stepped aside, and this, of course, another contentious issue within the ruling party. What do you make of all of that?
It is the politics indeed. It appears as if there are those that are given an opportunity to push back. There are those that, Sakina, are more senior. There are those that cannot be easily moved around. I mean, if you were to look at the step aside, remember, he went to the Integrity Commission of the ANC and he will then say that he has been cleared. And the Integrity Commission actually subsequently said that, no, we did not clear you of anything, but he continued to be the deputy president. If you are going to do this equitably across the factions without any favor, Sakina, it looks as if half of the ANC will be gone. I wonder how much left of the ANC will be once the whole anti-corruption maneuver has moved internally. How much of the ANC will be left for President Ramaphosa when he goes to the next elective conference?
And I suppose more importantly for South Africans who are not part of the ANC, it's become clear that the ANC's internal problems have now become an impediment on the country and how the country is run. where to for ordinary South Africans?
I mean, that's a poignant analysis, Sakina, because remember, the social unrest and the looting, it was triggered by internal crisis within the ANC. Actually, the ANC internal problems have been allowed to escalate to a national crisis. And the question for South Africans will be, should they give the ANC an opportunity to sort itself out? And while that opportunity is being given, what will be happening across the country? Because the country now needs proper leadership, needs responsive leadership to deal with the crisis at hand. And I think at some point it just might be clear for South Africans that they might not have sufficient time to allow for the ANC to indulge in sorting its own internal problems. It has gotten to that point where the crisis of the ANC is becoming a national crisis, and I think the ANC seems to be experiencing severe fatigue, Sakina, to deal with these problems.
We're out of time, Ralph. 30 seconds. Back to where we started, the Dr. Zweli Mkhize issue. So the president has been sitting with that report for a month. What should he do?
I think Dr. Zweli Mkhize should just call a press conference and ask South African for having afforded him the great opportunity to serve. And this will make the president's life easier. I mean, this is where you actually take a principal position and you allow the president to appoint someone who can help him in fighting against the COVID. That, I think, should be expected from Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Failure to do that, of course, the president will have to announce. But I think at least for something a bit more honorable in terms of this exit, it would be better for Dr. Zweli Mkhize to call press conference and allow the president to continue with his work.
And thanks so much for your time, Dr. Ralph Mathekga, political analyst.